Welcome back, Super Friends. Today we are going to be multiplying two fractions. What you'll need is your math notebook or folder, pencil to write with, and don't forget that super brain of yours. Stay tuned for the video. All right, Super Friends, we are going to multiply two fractions. So it's the same steps that we did in our previous lesson. Multiply straight across for the numerator, multiply straight across for the denominator, get your answer. And then for step 2, we're going to simplify that answer. So let's start with our first example. It says, what is the product? Obviously, because we're multiplying. And our fractions are 1/4 times 2/7. So let's get our first step. Multiplying across. That means I'm going to do 1 times 2 on top, 4 times 7 on the bottom. Now, what do I get up top? 1 times 2 is 2. Now on the bottom, 4 times 7 is 28. Now, knowing this, guys, step 2 should be so easy. I probably don't even need to write down all the factors for all of it. Looking at step 2, I'm just going to simplify my 2 over 28. I know that I can divide the same number by the top and bottom. That will give me my smaller answer. Now, since 2 is the only number that I have on top, and that's the biggest, probably factor that we could use, I'm just going to divide by 2 for the top and the bottom, guys, because I'm going to be able to use that 2 that we already have in our answer anyway. So if I'm dividing 2 divided by 2, that equals 1. And then at the bottom, 28 divided by 2, just think about what's half of 28. 14. So that would be that. If you didn't know that, you could just simply do your little house over here at the bottom, and then you would see that you would get your answer like this. Bring down the 8. That would be 4 minus 8. Sorry, that's 8. 8 minus 8 is 0. So you would see there that it would be easy and you get 14. So our simplified answer is 1 over 14. Now let's move what we just did over here out of the way. All right, cool. So now let's get our second example going. All right, now this one, it says, what is the value of the expression? Now this equation here, or expression here, deals with orders of operation. So that means that we have to do what's in the parentheses first, and then we multiply or do whatever is outside the parentheses. So if we're starting here, step 1, we're going to add this together. So what is 1/3 plus 1/3? If we can remember, it's just going to be 2/3. I bring down my multiplication. I bring down my 2/5. So now we have what we were working with. So step 1 says for us to multiply going across, so 2 times 2 over 3 times 5. Now on top, what do I get? 2 times 2 equals 4. On the bottom, 3 times 5 equals 15. Good job. So now let's go to our step 2. We are going to simplify. So for this case, thinking about it, I really don't feel like we can simplify because our factors for 4, so factors for 4 are just 1 times 4 and then 2 times 2. I know that 15, the factors for 15, I'll write that up here, are just 1 times 15 and then 3 times 5. There's nothing else. None of these numbers are the same besides the 1, right? So that means that our 4/15 is our simplified answer. That's as simple as it gets. There's going to be times where that's just your final answer. That's really it. There was no factors that worked, so we just got to take it as it is. That's like if we saw 7/8. That's as simplified as it is. That's our answer. There's nothing else to do. So let's go into our last problem. All right, so I know there's a lot to write. Go ahead and pause it so that you can write it down. but we are going to get started anyway. So in the class, 4/5 of the students like math. That's probably important for me to note, so let me underline it. 4/5 of the students like math, and of that group, 6/8 of the students like science. If there are 40 students, how many students like math and science? That's our question. So let's see what we're working with here. All right, so if there's 40 students, how many students like math and science? So what we're going to do is basically similar to what we did in our second problem. We have to set this up by multiplying. It's a two-step problem. We have to see what do these fractions, what answer do we get if we multiply them together? And then we have to multiply that by the whole number of students just to get our final answer. So in this case, we're going to get a whole number like what we were dealing with before, but let's at least set it up. So if we set up our problem, we're going to have our 4/5 of students in the class who like the math. I'll label them M. And then we're multiplying it by those students who liked science. That's the science. And the reason why we're multiplying those together is because let's pretend like we're starting with the 4/5, but then we have to take a group of that 4/5, which is the 6/8, and then that is what likes math and science. Sorry, that's what likes science. And then from there, we have to see how many of those students are they all together that like both. Very, very interesting, but that's how we set up the problem. So step one, we always do what's inside of parentheses first. Inside the parentheses is 4/5 times 6/8. And of course, our step one would be to multiply across. So that's 4 times 6. On the bottom, we're doing 5 times 8. 4 times 6 on top equals 24. And then 5 times 8 on the bottom equals 40. And now we don't have to simplify for this. We're going to bring down our multiplication, bring down our 40. Now, remember that trick I taught you guys before where you diagonally divide? That's what we're going to do here so that we make it easy. So if you could see our 40 and our 40, those are going to cancel each other out and end up being a 1. So it's going to be a 1 down here. This is going to cancel out. It's going to be a 1 up here. So now our new equation that we have is going to say 24/1 times 1, right? And then what do we do? Oh, slap a 1 underneath it also. So now what do we get? 24 on top, 1 on the bottom. 24 divided by 1 equals 24. So our students are 24 students. So how many of those students like both math and science? It's the 24 students here. Like both. All right, so that's what we're doing. You have a question like this in your problems. It's not the same exact numbers, but that's how you would solve it. You would set up your expression like how we did at first. You do what's in the parentheses, then you bring down everything else. And you could either cross multiply, or if the cross multiplying didn't work, you would just simply multiply going across like we did before. So you would just do 24/40 times 40, which we would put it over 1. And then again, 24 times 40 right here, and then 40 times 1 on the bottom, and just solve it the same way that we were doing before. So use these notes to help you solve the rest of your questions that we have for today.